As I've talked about for the last few days, we are all disgusted by what we saw in Minneapolis with the death of George Floyd at the hands of a police officer and 3 other officers who did nothing, it seems like, other than to hold him down. Knowing members of law enforcement, the vast majority of those, 99.999%, are good individuals who are there to serve and protect. And they are disgusted as well as what they saw in Minneapolis. And we're also disappointed and disgusted to see the violence that is going across our country right now. While we had a very violent evening 2 nights ago in Buffalo, we did not have a violent evening to really a full extent as to what we were worried about or what was being seen in other parts of the country. And I think that has a lot to do with our community standing up and saying we're not going to be defined by the violence, we're going to be defined by the individuals who helped clean up the mess that had resulted after Saturday night's incidents in Buffalo. And I think that's really what the spirit of this region is, the city of good neighbors, a county of good neighbors, as we come together to stand up to violence in all its forms, to talk about how we need to solve the issues of racial injustice. I thought about coming up with some really interesting quote, but then again, I don't really have the experiences of an African-American male or female, and I never can. And it really, as having lived a life that I have as a white male, I'm not going to understand the issues that an African-American will deal with. But I thought it was very important that we talked about the issues of racial injustice and how to best deal with it through nonviolence. And that's why I want you to hear the words or see the words of someone who knew about violence, who understood about violence, and unfortunately whose life was taken from us far too soon by a violent measure. And that's Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So if you may, I'd like to read you a passage from his speech when he accepted the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964. Violence as a way of achieving racial justice is both impractical and immoral. I am not unmindful of the fact that violence often brings about momentary results. Nations have frequently won their independence in battle, but in spite of temporary victories, violence never brings permanent peace. It solves no social problem. It merely creates new and more complicated ones. Violence is impractical because it is a descending spiral ending in destruction for all. It is immoral because it seeks to humiliate the opponent rather than win his understanding. It seeks to annihilate rather than convert. Violence is immoral because it thrives on hatred rather than love. It destroys community and makes brotherhood impossible. It leaves society in monologue rather than dialogue. Violence ends up defeating itself. It creates bitterness in the survivors and brutality in the destroyers. In a real sense, nonviolence seeks to redeem the spiritual and moral lag that I spoke of earlier as the chief dilemma of modern man. It seeks to secure moral ends through moral means. Nonviolence is a powerful and just weapon. Indeed, it is a weapon unique in history, which cuts without wounding and ennobles the man who wields it. I believe in this method because I think it is the only way to reestablish a broken community. It is the method which seeks to implement the just law by appealing to the conscience of the great decent majority who through blindness, fear, pride, and irrationality have allowed their consciences to sleep. Those are the words of Dr. Martin Luther King from 1964, and I think they fit exactly to where we are today. Except I believe the vast majority of our nation's consciousness are not sleeping anymore. They're standing up to the racial injustice that they've seen across this country. They want to say no more to police brutality, and I think it is very important that you are seeing the vast majority of people of this country saying peacefully, we need to change this. And that's what we need, are peaceful protests. So to those that are going to protest later today, whether it's in Buffalo or elsewhere, please be peaceful. Follow the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and we will be a better, more just society for it.